Hey folks, I wanted to do this video. This will be a comparison video between the Omega, the 80th anniversary edition Omega, the newest edition, and the Schuyler Thinline Quentel, the THINTEL. Really, I wanted to do this comparison to kind of show, and not in a bad way, some of the things that Crossway could do better, and kind of maybe some of the things that Schuyler could do better. Now, both of these Bibles are printed and bound at the same place by Royal Youngblood in the Netherlands. So they're from the same printer and cover producer. So these differences are specific differences chosen by the different companies. And I can see why they chose what they chose and why they did it. So and really this is mainly going to be a cover and features, not really a layout, because one's an ESV, one's an NASB, but there might be a few little things. So first of all, I want to say that both of these Bibles I consider cream of the crop. So I mean they're up there with the Allen Bibles. The Crossway Omega is right there alongside of Schuyler and Allen. Now there are a few things that I'll point out that where I think they can make a few changes and make a huge difference in the quality of their product. So first of all, the Omega, it's a black goat skin, just like the Thinline, but the goat skin is more of a typical goat skin that you'd find from a Youngblood production, a Youngblood bound Bible. Now it's a little floppier, a little bit of a different texture, just slightly different than the previous editions of the Omega. But if you compare it to another Youngblood production, the Schuyler PSQ, this grain of goat skin is very, very similar. They're about the same type grain and texture of goat skin. Both are produced by Youngblood and all, but for the Thinline, the grain is much deeper, much larger. It's just a different level of it's much more like a Highland goat skin that you'd find from an Allen Bible, which I love. So that's tops to me. Now the floppiness doesn't really come from the cover leather, but from the liner leather. Now the Omega is a little floppier than the Thinline Quentel, and I know that sounds absurd because I'm sure you've heard several people talk about how floppy the Thinline Quentel is, but the Omega, the 80th anniversary edition Omega, is definitely more floppy. So that comes from the liner. Now this liner is a thinner, softer liner than the liner used in the Thinline Quentel. You can kind of see some of the differences in texture, just a little bit different texture. This is it has a little firmer feel to it. It stands up a little higher. Now, actually, this one's probably been used more than this one. This one's actually newer. It was produced in March. These were produced a few months prior, so it's probably been used a little bit more than the Omega. But the cover on the Omega is floppier, so that's, to me, that's better to me. Now, with the Cambridge editions, the Schuyler editions, they all have that same font that Youngblood uses, that goatskin leather cover right there. But the Crossway Bibles do that in the back. they'll do it in the back with a different font, which I actually like this better with the identification in the back. I like that. So personally, I like this a little bit better. Now, I wish that this deeper grain goat skin were on the Omega, because I'll use the Omega a little bit more. ESV is more of my primary translation. So, but you can definitely see the difference in the textures of the goat skin. And both have the perimeter stitching. Both have the raised ribs on the spine. Both have the gold printing on the spine. But for some reason, it just seems like that goat skin cover on the Schuyler, it just makes these ribs look better. There are more ribs obviously on the Schuyler than on the Omega. The Omega is a little sleeker look, a little sleeker feel, where the Thinline is it's hard to describe the feel in comparison, but you can see the differences big time. But the ribs are done the same way, probably done with the same material, but this goat skin lends to probably a little bit better tooling because it's such a deeper grain goat skin, so you have a little bit more definition on the Schuyler. Okay, so another big difference, you can see here a big difference. You have 4 ribbons in the Omega, 3 in the Schuyler Thinline Quentel. Now, granted, these ribbons are smaller, and actually the Omega is thinner, a good bit thinner than the Thinline Quentel. But I still think I would almost rather have 3 of the multicolored ribbons that are like this, as opposed to the 4 kind of crappy ribbons that are thinner in this edition. Now there are some benefits to having the thinner ribbons. You won't have as much impression on the pages. You won't have it won't make as much of a crease. You have less ribbon in the gutter, so if you're reading, it has less you have less filling that gutter that could potentially distract you from the text. So, I mean, there's some benefits to having the thinner ribbon, but they're just not a really high quality ribbon. These are basically junk ribbon, in my opinion, in comparison to these Beresford just primo ribbons here. Now that is a big difference there. Now you don't buy Bibles for ribbons, but if you had a Bible with ribbons like this versus a Bible with ribbons like this, and they're fairly comparable aside for the ribbons, well, you're obviously going to pick the one with better ribbons if the rest of the Bibles are comparable. And ribbons are cheap. I just don't understand why Crossway would continue to put these junk ribbons in their incredibly nice Bibles. You have the white head and tail bands on the Schuyler, which I like the clean look, but I actually prefer the gold and black look of those headbands to the white headbands on the Schuyler. So I mean, I like that better on the Omega. For some reason, they stacked these ribbons instead of putting them side by side as they had in previous editions of the Omega. The stacked ribbons are just a terrible idea. That was not a win at all. Whoever come up with that, just not a great idea. Not a fan of the stacked ribbons. They get twisted up. It's not as easy to keep them organized. And if you're using ribbons, then you're a fan of organization. So I'm not a big fan of the stacked ribbons. Also in the back of these editions, as standard for Crossway, I wish they would take a note from these other premium editions. These maps, the map section is on glossy cardstock, and it's terrible. I hate these, and it makes me not even want to use them. The map quality is not quite as good as the Schuyler maps. Now the Schuyler maps are on a whole nother level, but it's on a glossy cardstock, which is just not user friendly. Also, the ESV is a 10-point font, where the it's a nice font, line matched on decent paper, but the paper, in my opinion, on the THINTEL is a little bit better, a little bit less ghosting. Not much. I mean, the newer Omega is definitely the nicest ESV, one of the nicest ESVs I have. But the paper on the THINTEL is just a little bit better, and the print on the THINTEL is a little bit bigger. This is an 11-point font. This is a 10-point font. I would almost, if we were talking about it, would you rather have a Thinline Quentel in a 10-point font that's thinner, like the Omega, or would you rather have an Omega in an 11-point font that's thicker, like the Schuyler Thinline? What would you prefer? I'm fine with the 10-point font and it being a thinner Bible, personally. I understand having the 11-point font. It's the exact same as the Quentel. I understand why you wouldn't want to change that. But just kind of trying to do an apples comparison. If this Omega were an 11-point font, it probably wouldn't be as thick as the Thinline Quentel, and it has a concordance where the Thinline Quentel doesn't have a concordance. But the Thinline Quentel has what the Omega doesn't, and this is where it becomes on a different level of a Bible. It has the lined paper in the back. The Omega does not have that. It has a good bit of lined paper, and it has more maps than the Omega, and the maps are on like a matte cardstock, like maybe a thicker Bible paper, but it's not that glossy cardstock, and these are much nicer maps, better color, more detail. It's just a much better map section. Granted, with the Thinline, you don't have a concordance, but it is still a really nice study tool, even without a concordance. So, when comparing these two, if I had something that Schuyler could take away from this, might be why not a 10-point font? You have some of the best paper around. Continue with this amazing goat skin, but what if you had a 10-point font? I mean, the Thinline, the PSQ is the same thickness, and it's an 8-point font. If you had maybe a 10-point font, you could either include a concordance, or the addition would be even thinner, as more comparable to the Omega. That's about all I could say that Schuyler could kind of learn from the Omega, or use a thinner liner, so the cover would be a little more flexible. Now, what Crossway could learn would be significant. You would want to have, now the cover is very nice, and really I'm not opposed to this cover. It's really nice, but this is definitely nicer of a goat skin than this smoother goat skin used on the 80th. It is super floppy, which I love the floppiness. They could learn more about the ribbons. They could learn more about the lined paper. Do away with the glossy cardstock for the map section. If on the Omega you added maybe 10 or 12 pages of lined paper, and you used a different type cardstock for your maps, and obviously some better ribbons, even if it was only 3 ribbons like the Thinline Quentel uses, that would be a better Bible in my opinion than what you have with the 80th. And even if you left those same ribbons that you're using in there, do not do this. Do not stack the ribbons. That is it's just terrible. I mean, that might be one of the worst decisions as far as in design and execution that I've seen from Crossway. Most of the time, it's much better. That was just really a poor decision or poor execution on Youngblood's part. So that's really the comparison between the two. I know it's not an apples to apples comparison because they're different translations, but like I said, these are both Youngblood produced Bibles. So this goat skin could have been used for the Omega. The font could have been smaller on the Thinline. So there's some things that both companies could use to get better, and that's really, as a consumer and as a Bible lover, especially a premium Bible lover, that's what we want. We want these companies to continually improve what the product that they're producing, so that we can continue to enjoy more the Bibles that they produce. So anyway, that's kind of my comparison between the Omega and the Thinline Quentel. Let me know what you think in the comments. I know that was kind of lengthy, but there are just a lot of cool things that I wanted to show you guys as far as differences. Which one would I use more? Probably the Omega, just because it's my primary translation. Whenever they produce a Thinline ESV Quentel, that might overtake the Omega on what I use more. Now there seems to be a little more yap. Now I would love for them to all produce a little more yap, but I understand them not doing that. Anyway, that's about all I've got for you guys today. Let me know what you think. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and you can get new video notifications when I post new videos, and also do reviews for publishers and do Bible rebind reviews and tutorials and such. So just be sure that you're a subscriber. You can also be eligible for our monthly giveaway, and this month is an ESV Thinline rebound by Francisco Guerrero. So be sure to check that out, find out how to be eligible. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. God bless.